Hey guys, welcome to GIMME Growth. We're talking about analytics today, and we're fortunate enough to have Dan McGaw with us. Dan is the CEO of Effin Amazing, which is an analytics implementation firm. They help people get their tracking in order so they can run their businesses and make good decisions. Before that, Dan was the head of marketing for Kissmetrics, so it's definitely safe to say he knows what he's talking about when it comes to analytics. And he's the proud father of two awesome tools. I'll paste the links in below. The Effin Amazing UTM Builder, it's just a Chrome extension that makes UTM tagging dead simple, and Full Profile, a great way to get amazing data for email addresses you have in your list. So Dan, I'll let you say hi and then kick it off, and we'll go into the screen share.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, of course, Dan McGaw here. So have a lot of fun at Effin Amazing. Been doing a lot of cool things with companies like Kissmetrics and Code School, and even helping out a lot of other big businesses. So just looking forward to helping everybody else get started with analytics.
Awesome, cool, thanks man. Well, yeah, go ahead and share your screen, and I'll turn the videos off, and then we'll still be capturing the audio and everything, okay?
Sounds perfect. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is how to get started with event-driven analytics. Now, if you're not exactly sure what that means, it just means that events are actions people take, and the analytics tool you're using is based upon events. Instead of just Google Analytics, which just looks at visitors, we actually care about the actions that our users are going to take. Now, to help you out a little bit, let's talk about who I am, right? So, formerly the head of marketing over at Kissmetrics. I also worked at a cool company before that called codeschool.com, which was a great opportunity because I got to work with all the engineers and really understand how analytics get implemented. This is a great learning experience, but I've been an entrepreneur for over 16 years, so always been very, very data-driven. Had a great opportunity to work in the restaurant business when everything is down to the fraction of a penny, and that really, really helped stir my focus on making sure that everything we do is centered around data. Now, what I want to teach you today is how do I analytics, right? So this is really, really important because analytics is quite a vast space. Now, analytics is going to be the most important part of your business because it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Now, there's one big problem, though, with these things is that there is just way too many options. And if you're in MarTech like I am, you're going to notice that there's a new measurement tool that comes out every single week. Somebody's got their new hot flavor and their new hot sauce they want you to try. But at the end of the day, what you need to do is make sure that you understand one thing. You need to find the tool that's right for your business. Don't pick the tool that's at the top of Product Hunt. Don't pick the tool that's recommended on Reddit. What you need to do is understand your business requirements, and then you need to pick a tool based upon that. There's going to be a lot of options, but let's review just a couple that are really going to help you out. Now, you should all have Google Analytics. I mean, this is definitely the godfather of analytics on the web. Now, it used to be called Urchin years ago, hence the term UTM, Urchin Tracking Module, but Google bought it, and it's now called Google Analytics. Now, Google is going to be the best tool that you can add to your site because it's going to measure everything, and it's going to do it for free. So if we think about this, what we want to do is understand where people are coming from, how are they finding our site, what pages are they landing on. That's going to be what Google Analytics is for. Now, Google does allow you to do e-commerce tracking. It allows you to do conversion tracking, and you can do some very, very fancy things. Problem is, it's just really, really cumbersome, and it can be very, very difficult. So what I want to talk about is a couple other tools as well. Now, these ones, Mixpanel and Kissmetrics, are more focused on digital business intelligence. And what that means is that they actually are going to track all of the metrics of your business, and you're really going to be able to run some sort of BI on your business and be able to make really, really good decisions. So they track a lot of other things compared to just Google Analytics, and the fact that they're going to be able to keep user profiles, they're going to be able to store your revenue data, they'll track recurring revenue, they can actually see repeat purchases in e-commerce. These are all really, really important things you need to take into consideration when doing analytics. Now, let's worry about something that everybody talks about, right? You're going to track too much, and that's something I don't want you to do. It's really, really important when you get started out with analytics is that you measure just a few things. You don't want analysis paralysis. What that means is basically you've set up so many different tracking events, you've set up so many different reports and so many different metrics is that you have no idea which metric is actually driving your business forward. I see this happen all the time. Even I fall into this space every once in a while, and I want to make sure that you don't do this. Now, there's a simple thing that I want you to understand is that analytics is about asking yourself, is this metric going to create action in our organization? If you've ever heard of what's known as a leading indicator and a lagging indicator, if you don't have leading indicators that's going to affect the lagging indicator, then you're really not going to make change. So you need to choose metrics which will actually create action at your company. If you're not going to be able to turn this data into action, there's no point in tracking it because you're not going to do anything with it and it's just going to be noise. Now, to dumb this down as simple as we can, I have one simple metric at my business, and this is going to be the number of meetings that are created. So what we can see on this graph is a funnel report. We'll notice on the first one we have visited site. This is the number of people that have came to my site in that time period. And then to the next step, we have created appointment. This is the number of people that have used the appointment setting tool on my website to actually make an appointment with me, which is the metric that matters. Now, there's all sorts of things that lead up to this appointment being created, but if I focused on every single one of those things, I wouldn't really be able to drive my business forward. And since I run a consultancy, I need more meetings, I need more appointments. So we focus on that one main metric. Now, what's really important about this is obviously we have the main metric, which is conversion rate from visited the site to making appointment, which is just under a 1%. Now, what's interesting and what we do look at is what we start to look at are the things on the left-hand side. You'll notice we have the column called channel. And what we can see is our direct visitors, our social visitors, referral, organic, and even people that just came through email. Now, what we want to do is measure which one of these channels has the best conversion rate. And what we can see is that referral may not be sending the most amount of traffic, but it does have a higher conversion rate than the two above it. And you'll even notice organic has even higher of a conversion rate. So what this one metric enables me to do is focus on the number of meetings collected, but still be able to look at all the things around that metric to understand how I can improve my business. Now, what this one told me is that I need to write more blog posts. We can tell that we have a high conversion rate from people who come to the sites and actually end up creating a meeting when they find us organically. So if I wanted to actually do something about this, my leading indicator is that organic converts more, but what my lagging indicator would end up turning out is we need to churn out more blog posts and we need to write more content. And that's how you're able to turn this insight into an action. Now, what we need to focus on is what is most important for you. Now, my important metric may be meetings. Well, it's because I run a consultancy. You may run a software as a service, or you may run a subscription delivery service, right? There's all kinds of different companies, and all of your metrics are going to be different. So what you need to make sure that you focus on are what are going to be the key KPIs that your company is going to focus on. So is it going to be MRR, which is monthly recurring revenue? If you're a subscription business, MRR is really, really important. Now, ARR, which is annual recurring revenue, is going to be even more important if you're a B2B company. If you're focusing on enterprise deals and you're selling only annual subscriptions, ARR might be that indicator for you. But as well as you have bookings, you have leads, you have meetings, you have opportunities, you have closed deals. Only you can set that key metric. It's something that you can ask for help with. It's something that you can get somebody to come in and help you out. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you set your main metrics so you have something to monitor. And don't try to measure everything. You're just not going to get very, very far. Now, this leads me to a really cool quote, which is the fact that not everything can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And the reason why this is a really, really important quote that I want you to think about is that, for an example, Google recently removed the fact that we could see the keywords which people use to find our website. We used to be able to count the actual keywords. Well, now we can't count the keywords at all. Those keywords still count, but they can't be counted. But what we have to do is find other means and other ways of actually finding that information. But there's also things that you can count that just don't matter, right? Such as your bounce rate. Sometimes this has no impact on your site at all, but people will tout out that they have a 75% bounce rate like it's some golden ticket that they have to grow their successful business. That's something that typically just does not matter. So you want to make sure that you focus on the metrics that you can, and you focus on the metrics that actually matter. Now let's move on, okay? I've stressed enough that you don't want to track too much and that you don't want to have a billion metrics. Now, how do you do this? Well, first, we need to start out with a plan. And I see many people get this wrong. They just go out and start implementing. And that's horrible. You never want to do it. Let's make sure that we have a plan before we get started. Now, one thing I want to make sure that you understand is I recommend to start out using Segment. Segment is a data piping tool, aka also known as the Rosetta Stone of APIs. What it allows you to do is write one line of JavaScript, which is automatically converted into everybody else's native JavaScripts. So imagine adding one JavaScript to your website, and now you have Kissmetrics, Mixpanel, Woopra, every other analytics tool already added, like a tag manager would, but you could also write one line of code, and that works with all three platforms automatically. So definitely take the chance to check out Segment and see what it's all about. Now, the next thing I want to make sure that you understand is that event-driven analytics are made up of two primary things. You have events and you have properties. Now, to make it very, very simple, events are the actions taken by a user. Now, an event property is going to be the context about that action. So for an example, if I was to jump right now, some of the event would probably be jumped. Now, the property or the context around that would probably be things like how high I jumped, what color shirt was I wearing, maybe even what color hair I have. But these are all going to be the context around the jump. What we want to do is make sure that our events are somewhat vague, and then we allow our event properties to obviously describe them. Now, I will let you know this. You want to make sure that this works with whatever analytics tool you're working with. Some platforms treat event properties and events a little bit differently. A use case is the fact that Kissmetrics and Mixpanel treat properties differently, and you want to understand how that platform works before you go and implement. Now, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there's also a nice bit.ly link there that says Analytics Spec. If you go to that URL, you will actually be taken to our website, and you'll actually see all the versions of these analytics specs. Now, what I want to show you on the screen is a small cutout of what that analytics spec looks like. Now, what the spec is a document that we're able to use to plan out all of our events and also all of our properties. This is going to enable you to sit down and really think out everything you need to track and make sure you get it done correctly before you even go out there and implement any code. Now, just to explain a few things, and you'll see my mouse on the screen, all the way on the left-hand side, you'll notice we have sprint. This is going to describe when this is going to be done. Is this in sprint 1, sprint 2, or sprint 3? If you have a development team, they probably do weekly or bi-weekly sprints. This just means that the scope of work for those 2 weeks is locked down, and then they go and develop that amount of scope. Now, you can, of course, use this in our table to make it so that you can break this up into multiple sprints, but I'll talk more about that later. You'll also notice we have server versus client side. This just means whether they're going to be writing JavaScript, which lives directly on your website, or whether they're going to be writing maybe Ruby on Rails or Python that actually lives on the server. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but it as well is a very important thing that you notate on this. But we'll talk more about that in developer section. You'll also notice that we have integrated, which is going to let us know whether this has been done. There's WIP, which WIP means work in progress, and then as well as completed, which just means it's been integrated. Now, some of the important things about this sheet that I want to make sure you understand are how we can get set up correctly so we can plan. We'll notice that we have the event. Just like before, I said this is going to be the action the user took. So in this case, it's going to be viewed case study. And this is going to be sent anytime somebody views a case study. So anytime somebody comes to my website, views a case study, this event will be sent. Now, we very much describe this in the trigger below. And we want to make sure that we add a lot of context as to why and how this is sent. Later, this document is going to be sent to a developer, and they're going to have to make sense of all of the madness you wrote. So please be descriptive and as well as write things nicely. I'll skip over the audit part. We'll come back to that later. But you'll notice that we do have property name and property value. Now, what these are going to be the event property name and then as well as the value of that. So for an example, the name is going to be the category in essence of what it is. So when we think about this, well, we need to say case study. For whenever we want to know what type of case study they actually viewed or whose case study they viewed. So the property name is case study and the value is going to be Ginger Consulting because that's the actual case study they had viewed. Now let's say for an example they had viewed the GIMME growth case study. What they would see is once again case study because it's the same property name, but we would now have GIMME growth as the property value because that was the actual case study that they had viewed. Now, just like the event, we want to make sure we have lots of description. We want to describe this so people can effectively know what this means and when it's supposed to happen. So do make sure that you write a lot of wording in here so we know what happens. Now, because our docs are fancy, you'll notice we do also have a JavaScript formula over there for you. So if you do write out all of this information, it will create a nice JavaScript example for you. So please go check out the spec, use it. It's definitely going to help you out a lot. Now, what you want to do is you want to take this spec and go to your website and build out all of your events first. So what you want to do is go through your website and think about the things that your users would do, which would create a funnel. I always recommend to start with acquisition, then move into the next stage. So as I explained earlier, this is going to be the action somebody takes to the site. Now, because this action is always going to be looked at past tense, we want to make sure that we use a past tense verb. So as you heard me say earlier, I didn't say jump, I say jumped. Right? And that's because I'm not actually jumping when I look at this data. This is data that had happened in the past. So make sure that you make it past tense. Now, as well as the property is going to be an adjective. So try to make these descriptive, right? It's really, really important that they make sense and they describe the action that had happened. You can very much think about it in this manner. An event is going to be a verb because it's an action. And then the adjective is, or excuse me, the property is going to be the adjective which describes that verb, right? An adverb. So I don't think we need to combine them together, but just so you know, that's kind of the thought process. Now, when you use this sheet, you're going to want to write out your event names, then as well as the triggers, and then continuously write out the properties so you have a nice documented plan. I want you to start at the home page, go all the way through your funnel until the time somebody purchases, and start to track the things that they do. Things like signed up, completed onboarding, added a seat to their account, or even viewed the upgrade page. Those are all actions that you want to track, which make up your funnel. So make sure you put them down in this plan. I'll talk more about how we're going to use this, but take the time, think it out, and write all of those things down. If something needs to get deleted later, don't worry about it. We'll be able to take care of that. Now, all of the analytics platforms are going to use events and then as well as event properties. So we definitely want to make sure these get set up. But there are some platforms as well that do customer profiles. So when you think about platforms like Woopra, Mixpanel, and Kissmetrics, even Amplitude, what they enable you to do is store attributes about your customer so you can use those later for analysis and sometimes even notifications. Now, when you think about these in platforms like Mixpanel, you will have a separate thing called people properties, which you have to leverage to do this. So when you look at the spec guide, you will see that we do have people properties in there. They're directly linked to the events because these are the things that we update after somebody does an action. So for an example, as we talked about in the event, they viewed the case study, and that case study was K-Ginger Consulting. Well, because it was sent as an event, that is simply on the behavior side of the platform. If I later wanted to use this information to understand or to send email notifications or understand which case studies led this person to a conversion, I also want to store this as a person profile. So what we're going to notice is the case study is viewed, we have K-Ginger Consulting, and then we describe that as well. Once again, we have server client, and then we have some notes and documentation. But there's more interesting ones that you may want to do, such as knowing how many case studies did a person view before they subscribed. So for an example, we have quantity case studies viewed. So what actually happens in platforms like Mixpanel is every time they view a case study, we increment this value by 1 on their back end. And what happens is every time they view one, they increment by 1. We now see that 5 case studies being viewed, you're more likely to convert into being a customer. Now, with that being said, if we're able to identify these properties and they are indicative of a subscription, well, now we need to know that, or now we need to show people more case studies. We need to find out unique ways to show people case studies, which give them a better perception on why they should buy. And this is something that you can very easily do if you set up your analytics correctly. Now, once again, all you have to do is go to this URL at the bottom of the page and you'll be able to get the spec. So let us know if you have any questions. Now, once you've done this, I want you to sit down with your team, only the marketing team, maybe the CEO, and do an internal review. Okay, maybe even just sit down with your marketing associate or even sit down with your director of marketing, right? Let's try to make this simple. What we first want to do is make sure that the naming makes sense. I've seen companies that have registered as an event for one page, and then they have signed up as the same event on another page. Now, the problem is that registered and signed up will look as 2 different events inside of any analytics tool. Now, if I try to run my numbers, I don't know which one I should look at because I have registered over here and I have signed up over here. So what you're going to want to do is get people involved that understand that we are going to either use the word registered or we're going to use the word signed up. And then we also want to make sure that all of these things are kept nice and short. I don't want you to write they viewed the homepage with all kinds of extra text, right? Like, we don't need to know everything in there. What we want to do is keep the name short or it won't appear in the UI. Now, obviously, with short names, we want to make sure that we're being as clear as possible. So try not to use acronyms. Try to use clear words so everybody on your team can understand. I cannot stress to you enough how important nomenclature is in these types of sheets. And the reason why is that when you hire 5 new people, they need to be able to read this document and immediately understand what it means in analytics. Now, when they go into the analytics tool, they shouldn't be demystified by the ACR that you have written in there because they have no idea that means acquired customer recently, right? You should make sure that all of this stuff is readable and that a stupid person can read it quickly. Now, another thing I want you to understand, which is an advanced feature, most people don't get to know this, is that when you have the opportunity to say true or false, you should actually leave the date. So when we have a customer that's stored in analytics and we say subscribed, we shouldn't say subscribed equals true or subscribed equals false. What we should do is say subscribed equals 9/21/2016. And the reason why is because we can look back and now see that date, and if the date exists, we can say it's true. But if nothing exists, we now can know that that actually is false. But knowing the date something happened is extremely important. So what I want you to take very seriously is when you have something true or false, also known as a Boolean, you want to make sure that you use a date instead. Now last, while you're doing this internal review of your team, I want you to make sure that you consolidate as much as possible. Depending on the analytics platform, if you're using a tool like Mixpanel, you should have an event called page viewed, and then you should describe what page it is by using the properties. This is really, really important. Now, when you use Mixpanel, that's the case. But on the flip side, if you're using Kissmetrics, you should have viewed homepage. The reason why is because they both think about data differently. And that's the reason why I stress to you, make sure you understand which tool will be best for you and which tool is going to be best for your implementation process. Now that we've done this internal review, let's make sure that everyone agrees on this. There's a few things that we've learned over the past couple of years while doing these implementations which make it really, really helpful. Now, when you do this review with your team, you're going to want to review everything, okay? Don't leave any stone unturned. We want to talk about all of it. Now, one thing that we learned is that we do not delete anything off the spec. If we make a decision that we do not want to track an event or an event cannot be used or a property cannot be captured, put a strike through on it. It's Command-Shift-S on your keyboard with Google Sheets, but use a strike through, okay? Do not delete it, because what we want to understand is that 6 months from now, we want to say, hey, did we try to track this at some point? And then we potentially want to understand why we did not track that. So if you leave a strike through, we know that it can't be tracked now. I would also leave a comment on that saying why or a note, but don't delete it from the sheet. Really, really bad idea to delete it. Now, once again, as I stressed earlier, leave great details on what an event or a property is. The more descriptive you are, the more accurate it will be. Now, if you have a problem with writing descriptions, go find somebody in your office that's better than you and have them write the descriptions. Because I have somebody else in my office that wrote a spec for me last week, and there was no descriptions at all. It literally just said they viewed the pricing page. And the problem is the customer has 3 different pricing pages. Well, which pricing page was it? Well, unfortunately, they only meant the subscription pricing page. They didn't explain that, so now the development was done incorrectly, which causes further issues. I want to stress to you that you need to write descriptions. Long-form descriptions. Now, lastly, this spec is going to be your Bible for analytics, okay? You want to understand that this needs to be accurate, this needs to be clean, this needs to be loyal, it needs to be everything you've ever thought about when you think about the Bible. It just needs to be good, right? At the end of the day, this is going to be something that your marketing team, your product team, your engineering team uses as a guide to understand what's going on in analytics. And if you do a shitty job, it means you're just going to have shitty data. Nobody wants shitty data. Now, as I said earlier, you need to make sure this all works with whatever analytics tool you're going to use. Now, don't take my word for it on what's a good analytics tool, and don't go sign up for Mixpanel just because I talked about it 10 times in this presentation. Find out what the best tool is for your business and what's going to work best for you. Then design your spec around that, and then go back and do a gut check and make sure all of that information still works with your analytics tool. Now, let's move on to the next step. And this is the thing that I said with your first review, you don't need to get the developers involved. The developer review should be a big meeting all by itself. And I'll let you know the reason why now. You should not get the developers involved until you have something that is concrete, well thought out, and ready to go. And the reason for this is if you waste an engineer's time, they're simply going to waste yours back. And we don't want to waste engineers' time. Marketers can be great people, but a lot of us are really, really stupid. And the reason why is because we don't pay attention to what other people need. We focus on ourselves. Engineers will do the same thing. They only care about themselves half the time. We have to understand, that's just human nature. We all want to focus on ourselves. Even I do it. Now, the thing that we want to make sure of is that we prepare this nice and pretty document so when we get to that developer, they feel like we're actually doing something for them. We should not be making this about us. We should be making this about the entire company. Now, don't make them pull their hair out, okay? Try to be easy with them. Go into this with a box of donuts and some coffee. Make sure everybody in the office is excited. I don't care if you have to buy them a Star Wars coffee mug to make them happy. Make sure your engineering team is pumped up and ready to go. Because if you piss them off, your spec is just going to get ruined. The more that you do wrong to the developer, the more they're going to do wrong to you. And I work with a bunch of developers, and they say the same thing. When our clients piss them off by doing a shitty job, they get frustrated and don't want to do a good job. Now, because I'm their boss, they still do a good job, but imagine what that's like to be somebody on your team. Do you like it when engineering tells you no, they're not going to do something? Well, make sure that you do everything right so that way they understand it. Now, let's keep moving on. Come with your clean spec. Do your internal review with yourself, your CEO, your CMO, I don't care. Do a review with your team. Clean everything up, make everything pretty, get everything set up, and then come to the developers with a clean spec. Don't have it all messed up with typos. Don't have everything all over the place. It's going to be a bad idea. Make sure it's nice and clean. Now, when you do this, be prepared to explain yourself. The number one thing that I see happen when doing this is people get defensive. They're going to be asked, why do you want to track registrations on that page? And then the marketer gets defensive like it's obvious. Well, technically it's not. Most of the time when you're being asked the questions by the engineering or products folks, they're simply just trying to better understand. They're not trying to tell you you're wrong. Sometimes they are. You probably are sometimes too. But usually it's just they're trying to understand the way that you mean this. An engineer thinks a lot different than a marketer. That's the reason why we're in different departments. We should work more together and we might understand each other a little better, but that's not how it always works. So when you get asked questions, do not get defensive. Take the time, explain your thought. If somebody doesn't agree with you, that's okay. But the first time that you get aggressive or defensive, you're going to shut everybody down in the room. It's really, really important. Now, what you need to do is also understand that you're going to need to compromise. I want to track things all the time, but simply due to the way that an application is architected, I'm not able to get to that code, or I'm not able to get to the data layer, or I'm not able to reach the database at that time. You need to compromise and understand that there will be workarounds. There will be ways to fix these problems. But in your first iteration, you want to make it as easy as possible, and it's better off if you just say, listen, I'm not that worried about it. Let's keep moving on. Let's get the first sprint done. Now, you need to remember, engineering does not hate you. They just do not work for you. At the end of the day, they work for the CEO. So if your CEO is on board or your head of engineering is on board, hey, you're doing a lot better. But the engineer is not your employee, and they do not do whatever you say. Now, if you have an engineer on your team, great, amazing. But still be considerate and understand that they are people. They're not just people that write code. Now, last thing is, when you're told no, find a workaround. If I'm being told no, I can't track this, I immediately try to find a workaround. If you need help finding workarounds, please feel free to reach out to me. Dominic will get you in touch with me really quickly. I've had to work on thousands, if not teens of thousands of workarounds for analytics, for marketing stacks, all kinds of stuff. There's always a way to get access to the data. It might take me 6 Zapiers and emailparser.com and potentially Dropbox hooked up through IFT over to my Nest to get the data. I'll get that data. Just reach out. I'll help you get the workaround. If your engineers can't do it, just let me know. Now, of course, after you do this review, revise your spec. Okay? You want to make sure that your spec is always reflecting what you've completed in these meetings. Now, a lot of times we leave comments, we leave notes, we do a lot of review of these specs before we're ever implementing. At our company, we typically work on the spec for 2 to 3 months before we ever write any code. This may sound like a long time, but if I mess up your data, your business is going to be messed up. Do you want me to rush it and make mistakes? Do you want to have bad data? Doesn't really make any sense, right? We're here to be a business and make money. If I don't have the right metrics, then I'm not going to make money. So take your time. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. You got to take your time, make sure you get it done right, and make sure the spec is clean. If things are wrong, it's going to be a problem. Now, I understand not everybody's going to have access to developers like me or have access to a ton of developers like many other startups. So I want to make sure that you know how to cheat. And this is really, really cool because I like to cheat and be able to get things done faster than actually having to take the path all the way through, right? The quickest way to success is the way I'm going to go. Now, I want you to be able to get shit done on your own. This is a big thing about me. I'm an agile marketer, and I should never be held up by somebody else. So I always design every marketing stack so I can do everything, and I'm not waiting on a developer. There's 2 ways to do this. You have KISS metrics, which is really, really good, and then you have Tag Manager. I will always recommend you to have a Tag Manager on your site. It enables you to add JavaScripts really, really easily. It enables you to plug in JavaScripts without even doing anything. You can set up event tracking. If you can even copy and paste some JavaScript from KISS metrics site or Mixpanel site, you can now install it on your site and actually track some stuff. You never even have to get a developer. So check out Tag Manager, maybe take a course on Udemy on how to write JavaScript. Be really easy. Now, for the sake of being simple, I'm going to talk about Kissmetrics in this example because they have a really interesting backend that enables you to be able to build funnels without ever using a developer. Now, one thing I need to stress, Kissmetrics was an analytics platform built for marketers by marketers. Neil Patel and Heaton Shaw, hands down, some of the best marketers out there. They built this platform specifically to solve their marketing problems. Other platforms like Mixpanel were built for product people. Platforms like Woopra were built for e-commerce idiots. These platforms are different. Kissmetrics, a little bit better when allowing a marketer to go in and track their own stuff. So let's talk about this. You can build a funnel without a developer. Now, if you sign up to a Kissmetrics account, they're all paid plans. Reach out to their support. Tell them that you're a small company. Be like, yo, I'm a small fry. I want to test out the platform. We're going to get funding in 6 months. Just tell them whatever it takes, and they'll give you a freemium account. Now, Kissmetrics makes this dead simple in the fact that they have a WYSIWYG editor on their back end that enables it so you can create your own events. Now, what we'll see here is we have our new event. We have when a person visits a page, which is going to be the thank you page, I want them to get an event called purchased. Now, this makes it so that whenever somebody hits that page, you see a purchased event. You would be able to see this in a funnel. Now, what I want to advise you of, if somebody hit refresh on that purchase page, you're going to see that event come through multiple times. Well, if you're just using a funnel, it doesn't really matter. Now, you will see your purchase metrics thrown off a little bit. Kissmetrics does have some workarounds for that, so definitely let me know if you have problems. But this basically makes it so you can track viewed homepage, click sign up button, registered, and then purchased without ever having to get a developer. They enable you to do this on pages, on forms, and as well as on button clicks. So super, super simple. Now, what this is going to enable you to do is build a funnel in about 5 minutes. In this one here, what I'm showing you is a funnel which is totally built by using the WYSIWYG editor, and then as well as running an A/B test. So what we'll see is we have viewed homepage, which is tracked just by the page being loaded, viewed the sign up page, and then lastly, when they click the sign up button, we send the sign up event because that's how they did it. I didn't need a developer at all. Now, another cool thing is if you're doing A/B testing using Optimizely, it's already integrated with Kissmetrics. Once again, no developer. All you got to do is add the Optimizely script, turn the Kissmetrics integration on, and you're already tracking your A/B tests in Kissmetrics. Now, one little bonus I'm going to give everybody. If you're measuring your A/B test in your A/B testing tool, you're doing it wrong. Do not depend on Optimizely, VWO, ConvertKit, any of those things to tell you the successfulness of your A/B tests. The reason why is because you're only looking at that in a one-dimensional manner. You should be measuring all of these tests in your analytics tools and looking at them in a clean funnel. So for an example, we can see that we were testing the button create a free account versus the button that says get started. What is interesting is when we looked at this in our A/B testing tool, we saw the conversion rate for create a free account actually won getting people from the home page to the sign up page. Well, that was the metric that we were measuring in our testing tool because that was the page we were testing. For some stupid reason, we weren't measuring sign up, right? But if we looked at the metric get started, it may have had less people that actually converted to the sign up page. But if we look at the number of people who converted to actually signing up, the metric is dramatically different, right? So you want to make sure that you look at this stuff in a funnel so you can see how these people act over multiple steps of the funnel, not just the two metrics that you have in Optimizely or VWO. Use a funnel report to measure it, and this is a quick way that you can do it using Kissmetrics without ever getting a developer involved. So let's move on. Let's talk about actually integrating the things. If you do have a development team, you are going to have to get things integrated. And I want to give you a couple quick tips which will enable you to do this really, really fast. Now, the first one is don't be afraid to pair with a developer. This is something that I learned years ago when I was at code school. Pair programming is something developers should do more often. Simply put, they get one monitor, one computer, two keyboards, and they sit there and they code together. Now, they're not both just hacking away, writing things down. What's happening is they're actually collaborating on the code. So one developer may write, another developer may think about it in a different way, and they actually say, hey, what about if I thought about it this way? And they'll write the code. These two minds work together to give you better code. Now, what's crazy to me is that the marketer does not go with the engineer and sit with them when they're writing this code. It may take the engineer 8 hours to implement something pretty simple for you to get out of tracking, but if you're not there and they run into a roadblock, that's going to be a roadblock and they're just going to figure it out, and it may not be the way that you had envisioned it. So don't be hesitant to say to the development team, hey, while you're doing this, I would love to sit with you and help. I'm not going to do everything, but I want to make sure I can be there in case if you have any questions. It would also be great if I could learn a little bit more about Ruby on Rails and the way this is done, so next time I can do this better for you. So don't be hesitant to do that. It's actually a service offering at our company. We offer large companies to pair program with one of our engineers, so when their engineers go to code, they do it correctly and they make less mistakes. Mistakes equal dirty data. Nobody wants mistakes. Very, very important. Now, what I want you to also understand is that once it goes into the code, you need to push this to staging. Do not push this to production. Make sure that you test all of your code on a staging environment and then audit it using a live view. Almost every analytics tool has a live view. When you're actually going through the site on staging, you can click all the buttons and then watch the events come in, such as page viewed, page viewed, page viewed. We can actually see who this is. Is this us? Is this somebody else? But what we want to do is make sure that the spelling is correct on the event name, the correct properties are coming through on that. We want to make sure that everything makes sense across all of the events. You should never push to production until everything has been completely audited, because the last thing we want to do is make a mistake. Now, something I need to make sure that you understand is that once it's in analytics, it's always in analytics. Analytics does not have a little eraser on it where you can erase one thing. The only thing you can do is reset the whole account, and nobody wants to reset their whole account. So make sure that you audit it in staging before you ever push to production. Now, let's make sure that we focus in on what are you auditing. Right? Now this on the right-hand side is going to be Kissmetrics Live View, just a little bit different than mixed panels. The first thing that we want to do is we audit every event name and every property name for spelling. Really simple. We also want to check capitalization. A lot of people forget this. They'll put signed up with a capital S in one spot, and then they'll put signed up in another spot with a lowercase s. Analytics looks at everything with capitalization, so these two things would be different. So we want to make sure that we check the capitalization. It's in our recommendation that everything on an analytics spec and everything you do in analytics should be lowercase. You should never use capital letters ever. I've seen people do camel casing. I've seen people do all caps. I've seen people do capital first letters. And every time I see that, somebody makes a mistake. Always make everything in analytics lowercase. It will save you a lot of hassle, a lot of problems, and you don't have to reach over that little pinky and hit the shift button anymore, right? Everybody's got to reach over that pinky to get the shift button. Now, hey, do this all in a test account like I said. Make sure that you're doing this on staging because I don't want you to mess up your data. Nothing goes into production that's honest or until it's audited. Now, of course, once it's in, it's in. Don't fuck it up. It's important. It's really, really important. You do not want to mess up your data. You cannot get rid of it. Cool. Now that you've put it in staging and you've had a chance to audit it, make sure everybody is cool with it. Walk around the office and tap people on the shoulder and say, look at this awesomeness I've created. I want to make sure that you appreciate it. Do you think this makes sense? You should have done much of this when you were reviewing your spec, but now that it's actually in the code, we also want to make sure that everybody's cool, everybody checks off. CEO, CMO, yourself, and even the engineer that wrote the code, and possibly the product manager. Make sure everybody's happy. Now, the next stage in that might be a little obvious. I want you to hit deploy, right? You probably don't have the power to hit deploy, but your developers do, right? Deploy that data and then analyze it, right? This is going to be some of the most important things that you can do for your business, which is understand your metrics. Now, what I want you to do is understand your traffic. Platforms like Google Analytics make this super, super easy. That's the reason why everybody should have Google Analytics. You need to measure your traffic. You need to know who's coming to your site, how they got there, which pages do they land on, what is the behavior flow at which people use your site. There's so many cool things about Google Analytics that people just get overwhelmed with. If you distill it down and focus on the fact that it's all about the traffic that comes to your site, it'll make it a lot easier for you to analyze. Now, I do have one cool thing which just came out earlier this week. If you get the Google Analytics mobile app, it has the new assistant, which is literally machine learning and figuring out what things are happening on your account. I just found out that our site had a 22% increase in traffic in the past week from TechCrunch. I would have never have seen that just like sifting through data. But because of this new assistant feature, it was brought to me as a notification. It was like the coolest thing ever. Download the Google Analytics app and then check out Assistant. It's really, really rad. Really, really awesome. Now, another report you want to look at is going to be cohorts. And this is a mixed panel cohort report. Simply put, cohorts are buckets of people. So let's say myself. I graduated high school in 2003. That means I was in the cohort of 2003, the graduating class. Now, if you look at cohort 2004 and 2005, there's different things about each of our cohorts. Those kids that were 2 years ahead of me, they were stupid and they didn't do anything with their lives. The kids right ahead of me, they did pretty good. My class, 2003, we were awesome. We all went on and did amazing things. I don't know what happened between the different cohorts, but because we put these three different groups of people in cohorts, we can measure that. Your analytics tool can do the same exact thing. You can put people in cohorts by the date that they signed up. You can put them in cohorts by the date that they subscribed. You can even put them in cohorts by properties that we know about those people. But what we want to understand with a cohort report is typically retention. Once somebody's in a cohort report, do they keep coming back to the platform on a weekly basis, maybe a monthly basis? What you'll see in this one is we're looking at the number of days the users were retained. So in the first day, we retained roughly 60-something, 90-something%. But one day later, we had nobody. And then 2 days later, we had even less. This is 7% of 394 people that came back. And what we can see is this deteriorates over time. Now, this product, which is one of mine, Fuelsy, does a really job bad at retaining clients. So not that good of a thing, but at least we can identify in cohorts. Definitely something you need to use for your business. Now, next is going to be funnel reports. Everybody needs a funnel report. I don't know of an analytics platform that doesn't have a funnel report. Funnel reports are key to your business because it helps us understand each step of the sales process. So once again, they visited the homepage, they visited the pricing page, and then they finally subscribed. Now, an important thing to remember with the funnels is it does not mean that they did these actions one after the other. Now, if I'm measuring a funnel, it's called viewed homepage, viewed sign-up page, and then signed up. That does not mean that other things didn't happen in between. There's a concept known as a loose funnel. So in other words, they viewed the homepage, they then went to the FAQ page, they then went over to the support page, they then went back to the website, went to the homepage, and then they went over to the viewed sign-up page. Now, they met all of those criteria, right? Now, let's say they went from viewed sign up, they then went to the pricing page, they then went to the FAQs page again, and then they went and signed up. Because they still did those two actions in consecutive order, one after the other, even though there was things in the middle, it would still appear in this funnel. So make sure you take that into consideration when reviewing your funnels. These are simply saying this event happened once, and then this event happened after, and then this event happened after that. Now also do some research on the way your analytics tool thinks about funnels. The way that Kissmetrics thinks about funnels compared to the way that Amplitude thinks about funnels is very different. And you want to make sure you know that. So when you analyze the data, you actually have insights. Now, of course, the most important metric you probably should be measuring is money. I don't care about much, but I definitely care about money. Dom will tell you, I only care about making my clients money. I don't care about leads. I don't care about signups. I don't care about registrations. I care about when money goes in the bank. I treat my business the same way. So you need to make sure that you're worried about your money. Without money, you're out of business. I don't care how much VC money you raise. You could be like Uber. If you don't become profitable one day, you're still going to go out of business. Money is key. Now, if you watch the money that comes in, you can maybe go raise some more VC money if that's your goal. I'm not a big VC fan, but you can be. It doesn't bother me. Now, with this, if this is a mixed panel, this is a mixed panel revenue report. What we're able to do is understand how many customers we have, what is the average money that a customer pays us, and then what is our total revenue in this period. Now, there's other cool things that you can do, such as understand the lifetime value of a customer, and then as well as understand where that lifetime value comes. In this one, I'm looking at lifetime value by channel, and we can see that this channel right here did not always do good, and now is doing really bad. But this purple channel, for some reason, recently spiked its lifetime value. What this is going to do is be the leading indicator for me saying, hey, I need to go focus on this channel more. If we notice that Facebook is driving our highest lifetime value customers, well, we should probably spend more time or money on Facebook. If we notice that Twitter is driving no lifetime value customers, we should probably stop spending money or time on Twitter, right? These are all pretty self-explanatory things once you find out what these metrics are and start tracking them. Now next, this is a report that's only going to be offered really inside a mixed panel. It's the segmentation report. I do really like it. It enables me to look at one event and then see all the properties from a property name that break it out. So for an example, this was visits to our site by ad network. And what we'll notice is we have BrightRoll, Tapjoy, Facebook, AdMob, Twitter ads. We're able to actually understand how people are getting to our site and then what is that breakup. What we can notice is Twitter ad drives the least amount of page views while BrightRoll is killing it. Right? So now what I would want to do is then look at which one of these is driving the best conversions, because potentially BrightRoll drove 2 conversions while Twitter drove 100. Which one would you invest into? The one that's driving more conversions with less traffic, or the one that's driving less conversions with more traffic? Probably going to focus on the one that has more conversions. Now, with that being said, as I mentioned earlier, you shouldn't be doing all of this at once. Break it up into little steps, little sprints, and then go at it like that. It's really, really important that you repeat this over and over and over again and not try to do it all in one long slog. I've worked with clients where we have spent a year building out their analytics stack just to make sure that it's done correctly instead of making it all get done in 2 months. And don't get me wrong, we could have done it in 2 months. they would have never have used the data. They would have never have found value. They would have seen every single report and been like, there's way too much here. So by breaking it down into smaller pieces, we're able to give them one metric that matters per month, and then they were able to build insights and create action and actually do something with that data. Just like I said before, metrics are all about creating action inside of your organization. If you can't create actions with the metric, what's the point of tracking it? Thank you very much. This has been really, really awesome. I appreciate it, Dom. Let me know how else I can help.
Cool. That was awesome. That's such a thorough presentation.
Thanks, man.
Really, really great. Hey, do you really quick, will you stop sharing your screen and we'll both come back split screen and I'll do some questions?
Absolutely.
So I don't have many questions because that presentation is so thorough, but I wrote some down and I thought that these would be useful for the audience. Can you describe a little bit about what UTM best practices are, like source versus medium versus campaign? I have a blog article that I'm going to share on that, but like in your mind, how do you usually break down source, medium, and campaign so that they stay consistent?
Yeah, of course. Source, medium, and campaign with UTMs are really, really important because you want to make sure that you use the same things over and over and over again. And this is a common problem that we see. It's the reason why we built the UTM tool. You want to make sure that you predefine your sources and mediums early. So for an example, your source is going to be the place at which this started. So if I have a Facebook ad, Facebook is going to be the source. If I have an email campaign being sent through MailChimp, MailChimp is the source. But what we want to do is have a long list of all of these sources to start with, and we keep using those. Once again, capitalization is important. Everything in analytics should be lowercase. Now to move on past sources, since that is the source at which something started, medium is going to be the method in which something got to you. So if you think about this, very similar to flying on an airplane, I bought an airplane ticket with Delta. Delta would be the source. Then the way that I got to San Francisco was on the airplane. So that would be the medium at which I got there. So when you think about the things, how did you deliver this method or this thing to the person? But you want to make sure sources and mediums are very well thought out in advance so that way you don't have any problems. If you use our UTM tool, we already have presets in there. So if you try to type email, it locks you into something. You type Facebook, it locks you into another thing. And then as well as we're making a team presets feature so you could force anybody on your team, Dom, to always use Facebook as a medium. But you just want to stay consistent and always use lower cases. Never use capital letters in anything you do with analytics.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely pop the link for the Chrome extension in there.
Thanks.
And then, so you mentioned a little bit about this, like with Kissmetrics and Google Tag Manager. Like, what if I don't have a dev? You also mentioned something recently that Mixpanel now has auto capture. So can you talk a little bit about that for some teams that might not necessarily have somebody who can do event tracking and they're just looking on the server side? I'm sorry, they're just looking on the client side for like tracking different events throughout the page?
Like in regards to Mixpanel's auto track explicitly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used it, so I can't say a ton.
Okay.
But to my knowledge, it works exactly like Keep.
Okay.
So one of the problems with analytics is obviously a developer, right? You have to have developers. So platforms like Mixpanel have auto track, which track every single element on a page, and then they store that, and later you can come back and do retroactive tracking. What you're going to want to make sure of is that when you think about these things, is that when you do this retroactive tracking, if something changes on your site, such as you change a button color or if you change a button location, it breaks all of that retroactive tracking. Okay. And this is the reason why we warn people like, hey, retroactive is great, but once you make a change on the site, it changes that tracking, and you can't necessarily link them together very, very easily. But auto track is great because you never have to worry about setting up events again. You can just do it whenever you have time.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's all client-side events, just to be clear, not server-side.
Yes, all client-side events.
One thing on that note then is, let's say that I have 3 different register buttons on the same page. Mm-hmm. Just to reiterate, those are not 3 different events. That's the same event with 3 different properties of the placement, correct?
That's if you're using a platform like Mixpanel. Now, if you're using a platform like Kissmetrics, you're typically going to make sure that you have one registered event that covers all of them, and then potentially an event that tracks each one of those. And that's just due to the way that they built their funnels. This will be changing in 2017, but it hasn't changed yet. Okay.
And then, so for example, let's say that we do change something and then it breaks everything. This leads me to a grander question, which is like, what if I already have analytics implemented and now I've watched your presentation and I'm like, oh shit, I've done everything wrong. How do I actually reconcile? Do I just start fresh? Do I try to map the data? What would you suggest if somebody's in that situation?
Typically, I recommend just to start fresh. Whenever we've seen people really try to map things together, they actually don't use that historical data very much. And you're better off just starting out with a clean data set. The way these platforms work is you have a small database connected to the analytics, and it's really hard to import data in there correctly. You can do it, but it just adds more noise. Most of the times, if you're a smaller company, just start over fresh. If you're a bigger company, just keep optimizing, and eventually you're going to use some BI platform anyways. So like, don't overthink it. Try to keep it simple.
Okay, cool. And then speaking of overthinking things, what if my Google Analytics and my Mixpanel say different things?
Yeah, so all analytics platforms are going to tell you different things at all times. You should expect roughly a 5% variance in all of your platforms. And this is because Google Analytics tracks in one way, but if somebody has ad blocker on, Google Analytics can't actually track that person. But then in Mixpanel, you're tracking server side. Well, ad blocker doesn't stop the server from sending in the data. So you should expect discrepancies between many tools. It's very, very normal. Just understand that when you look at a tool, if you set your mark on a metric and no data or like you're not changing your architecture or anything like that, as long as that metric's going up, you're still doing good. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. You just want to see the good metrics go up and the bad metrics go down.
I've definitely seen some people, including myself, get locked up for hours being like, you know, what the hell's going on?
I'll do that.
Now, in Mixpanel, you mentioned if there's a Boolean like true or false that you would use the date as the property.
Yeah.
Are events, generally speaking, auto-dated or no?
So the events will, the properties are not, and you're not able to actually access those dates of the event. So you're able to say, did this event happen in this time span? But it won't tell you that this event happened at that time. The events don't get a property of time on them.
Okay, perfect. Now, a little bit more advanced, what about merging identities across platforms?
Yeah.
Like, let's say that I have a mobile app, and let's say that I also have a website, and I want to be able to merge the actions that somebody's doing on both of those. What's the best practice for that with Mixpanel, or is it better to lean towards a tool like Amplitude that handles that like more automatically? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would definitely, if you're really focused on cross-device attribution, it's really, really important you choose the right tool. Platforms like Kissmetrics and Amplitude do a way better job at merging identities together. And they actually literally take the timestamps and shove the two things together, and now you have all these timestamps. Now, this provides an additional layer of problems, though, because over time, as those identities match up, it will change your historical data. So you have to take that into consideration. I was at a board meeting where the metrics were literally changing month over month, and the board was like, this doesn't make sense. And I'm like, you got to remember, as we get more information and they merge, we now know true attribution. So we're making the best decisions we can. But on the flip side of that, if you use a platform like Mixpanel, it cannot merge an identity together at all. It simply now identifies the new device as the originating user and then deletes the history of that new device. So if you're focused on cross-device attribution, which is more focused on acquisition compared to product metrics, you probably don't want to use Mixpanel. Mixpanel is not the best for customer acquisition. It's really good at product stuff. When you dead focus on acquisition, Kissmetrics, Woopra, Amplitude for sure, these products are built to merge identities.
Okay, great. So last question, speaking of attribution, and this is a little bit of a mind bender, more so on the advanced side. You mentioned that the funnel is always tracking if an event happened, if one event happens and then another one happens sequentially, regardless of what happens in between. Now, what happens if I'm curious about what has happened in between and if that's led to the secondary event happening? So for example, somebody sees pricing page B, or they see a testimonial page in between, and then they have a higher likelihood of actually signing up, which is a secondary event. This sort of thing is probably not worth it for a lot of early stage startups to track, because all that really matters is like, are there more signups or not? Mm-hmm. But how do you actually try and come up with that attribution as to what leads to conversion or the path to conversion? Do you have any sort of like best practices around tracking that, like grouping properties together to see what the trend is before a certain event, a desired or one metric that matter happens?
Yeah, so the behavior report from Google Analytics is hands down one of the best at doing this, the behavior flow, because you can see the path at which people go about your site. And you can say, I only want to see the path of people that converted. And you can really start to better understand that. So the behavior flow report in Google Analytics is really good. Kissmetrics also has a path report, which will enable you to say, show me the last 5 events before somebody converted. That report is also very, very helpful. I would not say it's perfect, but it definitely is good. Platforms like Mixpanel don't really make this too easy. Kissmetrics is definitely a little bit better at it. I'm actually testing another platform right now called attribution.io. And they're the only attribution platform right now that thinks about attribution in the way that I do, which is touch points. So for an example, every touch point is given a weight. So for an example, direct touch point is only given 1 point, but if you're a referrer, you're given 3 points. And what happens is it measures every touch point of that user, and then it builds me a horizontal bar graph telling me, hey, this is the attribution of users. I've not seen a platform do it that way. Attribution.io is building it out now, predominantly built on top of UTMs and stuff like that.
Okay.
But this is the platform I'm vetting now, which I really like, to see how that works. It gets even more confusing when you have things like retargeting mixed in, because then you have view-through conversions. But so far, attribution.io seems to be very promising. But the only other platforms I know very well, and I don't know if Amplitude does paths very well, but I know Kissmetrics does a decent job.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Amplitude. And then I guess the last thing too is like, we talked a little bit about your Chrome extension, but will you tell us a little bit more about full profile and also like Effin Amazing? Like I know that most of the clients you work with are usually a little bit larger, but in order to work with Effin Amazing, like when is the right time and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. So Full Profile is a data enrichment tool. Full Profile enables you to give us an email address and we can tell you 600 things about that person. This could be what their gender is, are they married, do they have kids, all the way to how long have they been employed at their current position, to are they interested in gardening books, which is pretty interesting. I'm interested in gardening books. But it can also tell you firmographic data. So where do they work, how long have they been there, what is the logo of that company, how many people work there, how many patents does that company have, all the way to the technologies that are on that company's site. So is the company using Google Analytics? Does the company have Zendesk? And all you have to do is send us an email using segment.io. If you're using Segment, we're integrated cleanly. Within 1 second of us getting the information, we send you all of this information back. You pipe it through Segment into any tool that you have. So it can go into Mixpanel, MailChimp, Salesforce, Zendesk, doesn't matter. 300 integrations directly through there. So nice and simple. Subscriptions start at $20 a month. We're still in beta, so definitely check it out, fullprofile.io. And then for Effin Amazing, we're an analytics and growth consultancy. We typically work with funded or $1 million revenue startups. Doesn't limit us to that. That's just kind of the stereotypical fit. We focus on helping companies get their analytics strategy set up, implement it, then extract insights, turn those insights into action, and that's where the growth side of our business comes into play. We do everything after somebody hits your site. We don't do paid acquisition. We don't do SEO. When they land on the site, our job is to convert more of them, get them through the onboarding program, and make sure they never cancel. So we focus on everything inside of there.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, like I said, this has been super helpful. I'm sure this video will be great. I'm going to stop recording now and then just kind of like say goodbye to you. So then but thank you so much for joining us, okay?
Yeah.
All right.